nowhere near as important as what you hear yourself say to yourself, and then who you become and what you do next. Tonight, I want to share a very fast version of a 50-year story. As you know, I think most of you know, I've had significant physical challenges over the past year, in particular, this long-term disease that I've been battling since my 20s. But over the last year, I've had significant physical challenges. And one of the reasons that I've been able to get through and come, I'm hoping to get back to thriving again. I'm sort of gradually inching up the scale. But as I've reflected on this, my fundamental reason for being able to do this is because of an attitude, a disposition, a way of looking at things that began when I was a young boy. And it's only, of course, in hindsight that we can view these things. But when I was at high school, I think it's fair to say that school killed my imagination, and along with it, my love of reading. I loved reading books as a child, but high school killed all of that. Fair to say that for most of my teenage years, I was not a happy person. One thing kept me alive, I think, and that is that I love sports, and I was blessed at being good at most of the sports I played. And so physically, I built up this level of discipline that has kind of stayed with me, for most of my life. I admit to letting my hair down a few times over the years, but basically I've got this constitution that was developed in those years of being a sports person. And in those years, my father used to tell us over and over and over that if you want to live a good life, you've got to be spiritually alive, physically active, and mentally alert. Now, my parents were devout Christians, and I was raised in that kind of environment. Fair to say that in those late teenage years, of the three that Dad suggested, spiritually alive, physically active, mentally alert, I really only took up one, the physically active bit. I didn't really understand the other two, and school had left me not thinking about much really, except sport and girls, I reckon, in those years. Nothing much else. But then when I began my working life in 1970, so it's 52 years ago, and I worked for one company for 2 or 3 years, and then I joined a second company where I would end up staying 11 years. And one of the things that really got me back to the mental alert piece was we did an in-house course, and it was called The Keys to Self-Development. So this is early 70s, and the company had a real focus on really looking after new employees and giving them not just the training and the products and services, but also the personal development that was pretty rare in organizations in those days. I was absolutely fascinated by the course. It taught me about self-awareness, about self-leadership. And there was a section in the course, there was quite a thick manual, and every so often it had a section that said, meet with your manager. And you went and had a conversation about what you're learning and what it meant. And I was blessed that my first manager was a good teacher, good mentor. And so that rekindled my learning. I started reading books again. I started getting really, really interested in things. And I started reflecting on Dad's three, and I thought there were a couple that were missing. And so to Dad's three, I added emotionally healthy. And I get why my father didn't get that piece, because when he was 10 years old, his father went to the Second World War, and that group of my father's age were devoid of male role models. And so a lot of men of that era were emotionally shut down for those reasons and for other reasons. But I felt it was a missing link, and I was in that time, you know, the 80s, where, you know, real men do cry was starting to become the thing, and men were starting to talk about, you know, our feelings and our emotions. And it was an exciting time to be a man now in my sort of early 20s. My business career was thriving, and I think primarily because I had good teachers and good mentors, and I'd rediscovered this love of learning and needing to find out. And not long after that, I added a fifth to the equation. I added universally aware, because I realized that I really was ignorant of lots of things in the world. And what began then in my mid-20s was a thirst to understand philosophy and spirituality and all those kind of things. And since those days, I think I've read a book a week ever since. And my desire to understand things has still got the same passion that it had way back then. And so what emerged was what I come to call the 5 faces of a human being fully alive. One is spiritually alive, one is emotionally healthy, one is mentally alert, one is physically active, and one is universally aware. And I built that, and over time, and when I first started writing books in 2000, I put that sort of model out there in the world, and it's been a very helpful model for hundreds of people ever since, and it's a fundamental piece of the work that I do with folk. And I'm now, as I look at it, and I want to take a facet of the model to have a bit of a look at. But what I've really realized over the last few months as I've battled these physical challenges is that spiritually alive, if you think of these as a battery, and they're all got their, you know, their levels. I've got really high levels spiritually. I've got really high levels emotionally. I've got really high levels mentally. I'm a bit down physically, and I've got really high levels in terms of universal awareness. But because I'm high in 4 out of the 5 areas, what it's done is helped me to lift my perspective physically. So I've actually been able to sustain a level of physicality, even though I've been really challenged with it, because the other areas have all been in good shape. And the reason that they've been in good shape is because they're a lifetime practice. They're not something I began yesterday. They're something I began a very long time ago, and I've worked on, built on. It's evolved in that time frame. And in the last couple of weeks, I've been thinking about how is this helpful for people, because we're in the conversation we had off the recording before, we were talking about how, you know, we've got a mental health epidemic worldwide. Wellbeing's become an industry. And I've been really thinking, how do I make a positive and productive contribution? And so what I've come up with, and it's a work in process, but I've come up with the idea that to be spiritually alive, that's all about human to human connection. You know, we need real humans that we're connected with. If you take a look at Dunbar's law, you know, he says 150 people we can have relationships with, but at the start of his explanation, he talks about having 5 people in an inner circle, maybe 15 in the next circle, and maybe 35 or so. So 55 people within your ranks. And so I've been really thinking about this and talking to some colleagues and clients about this, that those human-to-human connections, particularly with the 5 and the 15 people, are what sustains us spiritually. It doesn't matter what our belief system is, but if we've got this human-to-human connection happening, then we can tick the spiritually alive box. From an emotionally healthy point of view, that's about our attitude. As you know, I had a major operation. At one point, doctor gave me 90 days to live. I think I was 23 at the time. But the doctor that did this surgery that saved my life talked to me about an attitude of gratitude. And ever since that day, I say it out loud. Usually if I'm near a mirror, I'll look in the mirror and I'll say, I have an attitude of gratitude. Because I think it's a key to our emotional health to be grateful for our lives, whatever's happening in our lives. Because if we're grateful, what I've learned is when we're grateful for what we've got, we can have more of what we want. From a mentally alert perspective, I put sleep in there as the key. I don't know whether you've experienced it on your short-term steroids, Donovan, but steroids kill your sleep. And it can take a long time to get back to sleeping like a baby, which is the journey that I'm on currently. But it's a key to our mental alert. In the conversations I've been having with Ellen Parker, I don't know whether you've seen them. We're doing it. We've just done number 11. They're called Conversation About Conversations. And in one of those, Ellen talks about quantum oscillation. So it's the thing that happens in REM sleep when our brain goes through and puts everything that we've seen during the day in order, and what we wake up with is the result of quantum oscillation. So I think the ability to have a good night's sleep is a key to our well-being, along with attitude and our human-to-human connections. The physically active bit, it's all about exercise and the regularity of it. My wife and I, we walk every day and have done for most of our lives. Rain, hail or shine, we do our daily walk. I've also got an exercise regime that's been put together with the help of medical people. But it's the regularity and the routine of it that's the secret. And then from a universally aware perspective, it's about diet. What I discovered when my wife was ill 5 years ago, we changed a lot of our diet as a consequence. We just realized how bad we were eating. And I've since made observation that most people don't eat very well, which is why they don't perform as well as they could. So these are kind of 5 aspects of the 5 faces of a human being fully alive. Spiritually aware is about human-to-human connections. Emotionally healthy is about an attitude of gratitude. Mentally alert is about sleep. Physically active is about walking and exercise routine, and universal awareness is about diet. So, interested in what you've heard yourself say to yourself